Namaste. I am Dr. Rajvarma Sinha, Associate Professor, Department of Philosophy, Miranda House. My paper is on Rajdharma in Vedic philosophy with a special reference to the place and role of the king. Next slide, I will show. In the Vedic philosophy, the ruler or king is not to be seen as an isolated entity. His whole persona is pictured in a relative form. That is, his character, duties, and rights are placed somewhere between the idea of his achieving and aspiring for divine magnificence and the idea of his duties and responsibility in the mundane sphere of social, political, and ethical practice. On the side of the divine, we find that his character is painted in accordance with the concept of the Brahman as the ultimate ruler and protector of the universe. The ultimate reality of Brahman is conceived as the ultimate ruler of the people, and on the other hand, his conduct must conform to the ideals of Dharma, his duties and responsibility towards his kingdom and towards his praja, in the backdrop of the idea that we all are ultimately under the rule of the divine power. So, king is the one who rules on the earth, but according to the Vedic understanding, the true ruler is Brahman. Therefore, Brahman is called the ruler of the universe, Ishana, or the one who rules over everyone, Devanam Adhipa, or the one who rules over the gods. In the next slide, in this paper, I would try to analyze and understand how the character and functions of the king are conceived in the Vedic philosophy. There are different views on how the nature and role of the king must be conceptualized. According to Louis Dumont, in India, the king has lost his religious prerogative and has been secularized, even though the political sphere remains within the religious sphere. On the other hand, Theodore Porphyrius argues that the king is at the center of the socio political structure, and ritual symbols like fire and water have been used for political consolidation and legitimacy. Jan Gonda, on the other hand, argues that the king is an intermediary between the powers of nature and society. Stuart Gray, who advocates a rabbinical interpretation based on the context of the Vedic milieu, says that ruling in the Vedic context should not be understood as anthropocentric in nature, but rather deeply cosmological, entailing sacrifices and rituals and presupposing a deeply interconnected world. While I partly agree with Jan Gonda that king is an intermediary between the powers of nature and society, and partly endorse Gray's idea of a deeply interconnected world as depicted in the Vedic philosophy, I would like to argue that it would be misleading to start with the Western idea of monarchy with a regal political head. Next slide, please. It is no coincidence that the king is called a deva or god. For example, King Parikshit is called a god among men. This is to emphasize the divine ethical qualities in the king. The word Raja is derived from the root Raj or to shine. Similarly, the word Deva is derived from the root Div with the sense of shining. This reflects the luster which the presence of Brahman gives to everything. Shankar points out all this shines through his luster. It is said to be derived from the root Ranj or delights or makes happy. This reflects Brahman's nature of bliss. In the next slide, we find that a king is variously characterized in the Vedic philosophy. For example, he is characterized as Dharmatma or the embodiment of Dharma. In the Puranas, there is a story of King Vain, who was killed by the sages because he adopted the path of adharma and excesses. But this led to anarchy, as there was no one to guide the people in the right direction. The sages then rubbed the right arm of King Vena, and therefore from there arose the majestic Prithuvanya. Thus, we see that Prithu is placed against the dark background of tyranny and anarchy. Rig Veda also speaks of Gopa Janasya, or the herdsman of the people. The metaphor of Gopajanasya is quite revealing, as it indicates the responsibility of the king towards his people, not only in giving protection, but also in giving direction. Prithu appears to be the true Gopajanasya because he conquered his enemies and protected his subjects from wounds, injuries, and diseases. In his time, the earth produced grains without being cultivated, cows gave milk whenever desired, lotus buds were filled with honey, and no one remained hungry. When Prithu went to the sea, its waves solidified. The mountains made way for him. This reflects the ecological bonding of the ruler and the ruled, where the ruled includes gods, asuras, mains, sages, ascetics, ordinary men, animals, trees, and mountains. Next slide. The simile of the earth as daughter reflects and substantiates king's duties and responsibilities towards protecting the environment and guiding his people towards that end. The king looks upon the earth as his own daughter. This shows that the ruler has the duty of taking care of the environment and of adorning it. In this sense, the metaphor of milking the earth upon her consent to be his daughter shows a mutual respect and recognition of human beings, king being their representative, and the earth. The epithet of Dirgbahu shows the extension of the kingly power, his control over his subjects, efficacy of his law and order, his ability to conquer the enemy states, as well as the variety of roles accomplished by him, extension of his protection, not only for his human subjects, but also for animals, trees, herbs, rivers, and environment. This appears to be so on the empirical plane. At the cosmic level, his long arms signify the protection of Dharma, guiding his subjects and his entire kingdom on the righteous path. The epithet of Mahabahu is equally significant, as it signifies not only protection and punishment, but also the reach of his efforts towards both empirical as well as spiritual growth. The role, next slide, the role and function of the king I think the first slide, the earlier slide, the role and function of the king as portrayed in Vedic philosophy, sometimes directly and mostly metaphorically, has been sustained, substantiated, and concretized in the later political writings like Arthashastra and Kamandak's Nitisha. Kautilya says that the king shall never allow the people to swerve from their dharma. If a king maintains order, he not only preserves what he already has, but also acquires new possessions, augments his wealth and power. In the Kamandak's Nitisar, the king is said to be responsible for the welfare and progress of his subjects and is venerated by the latter as Prajapati. Not only should he follow the path of Dharma, the king must lead his subjects on the path of righteousness. A king treading the path of Dharma secures Trivarga for himself as well as for his people. On the other hand, king who deviates from this path has to dwell in the hell, like King Nahus. A king not having self-control is compared, for example, to a deer charmed by a hunter's song, an insect charmed by a blazing flame, a bee lured and subsequently destroyed by the sweet odor. A king who does not know how to control his senses may very easily be vanquished by the enemy. King Dandak was destroyed by his lust, King Janmejay by his anger, Dambhodbhav by his arrogance. It is important to see these texts as building essentially on the ethical foundations laid by the Vedic philosophy. Next slide. In the Vedic philosophy, king or Raja is not merely a mundane regal title. If we look closely, there are two essential aspects in it. First, it is positioned midway between the transcendental and the empirical world. And second, this position must be achieved or attained with shram or effort. It is important to notice that the notion of the king in Vedic philosophy is significantly aspirational. While on the empirical plane, as Dirghabahu, the king's arms must reach out to the ideal of Dharma, and as Mahabahu, they must encompass the growth and salvation of all under his rule. On the transcendental plane, the idea of king emerges as distinction which a person actually designated as a king has to achieve. It is nowhere a political given. Comparison with divine signifies that he should aspire to acquire divine qualities to ultimately realize his true non dual nature. No wonder King Jansruti Patrayan bows down before Rakku in order to attain the knowledge of the self. Adi Shankaracharya refers to the metaphor of the fight between Devas and Asuras as symbolizing the self's inner fight between the good and the evil, and eventual subjugation of the evil. In the realm of the political, while King Prithu symbolizes what is good, King Nahus symbolizes evil. The aspirational king will fight tooth and nail to establish the former, the good king, the Prithu. Thank you very much.